Rogan, every time you open your mouth, this company loses another decade. I feel ashamed that our customers have to sit and listen to you talk.
You should be careful when calling someone a burden. The only thing holding this company back is you.
Rogan, your way of working drags this entire company backward. That was how my CEO, Malcolm Ridgway, the self-crowned emperor of Ridgway Dynamics, opened the meeting. No greeting, no context, just a clean verbal punch delivered in front of 12 clients and a full executive panel, all of whom suddenly found their notebooks fascinating. The air snapped tight, the kind of silence that feels both humiliating and strangely electric. For a second, the world stalled, shocked as that slips under your ribs before you can defend yourself. But instead of reacting, I let a thin, brittle smile form at the corner of my mouth, the kind you wear when pain and irony collide. Impressive, I thought. He said that right here, in the building I own. Not that anyone else knew. But moments like that have a way of revealing who's really paying attention and who isn't. If you're still here, tell me, where are you listening from right now? Some people in that room had no idea what was unfolding. But if you understand it, then stay close. Follow this story and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Trust me, it only gets sharper from here. As my smile faded, I felt the client's eyes drift toward me, not with pity, but with a kind of cautious respect. A few exchanged glances, clearly unsure why the CEO felt the need to publicly cut down one of his senior directors. One woman's gaze lingered just a little too long, as if she were reassessing who actually held the weight in this room. The cold sting beneath my chest tightened. Moments like these leave bruises no one sees. I rose slowly, pushing my chair back with a scrape that vibrated through the conference floor. The sound felt louder than it should have, maybe because humiliation amplifies everything. I kept my posture straight, expression calm, even though the inside of my ribs felt hollow, behind me. Malcolm leaned back with a satisfied smirk, convinced he'd asserted dominance. He always mistook pettiness for power. But as I passed the clients near the door, one of them stepped slightly closer, lowering his voice to a confidential murmur. "You seem like the only person here who actually knows what's going on." It stopped me, not because it was flattering, but because it was true. I offered the smallest nod and stepped out. Malcolm thought he'd just silenced me. He didn't realize he'd just set the battlefield. Walking back to my desk felt like wading through a fog of half-whispered conversations. News travels fast in an open office, faster when the CEO publicly slices you open in front of clients. I could feel the shift in the air before I even sat down. A few coworkers lifted their heads, met my eyes for a fraction of a second, and looked away as if the humiliation might be contagious. Others pretended to be deeply fascinated by spreadsheets they hadn't touched all week. But I didn't react, not outwardly. There's a kind of stillness that comes after being embarrassed in front of a room full of people, a stillness sharp enough to cut glass. I sank into it, letting the silence around me settle like dust. If Malcolm thought his little performance broke me, he hadn't been paying attention all these years. The rest of the afternoon stretched forward with a brittle sort of clarity. From my corner of the floor, I watched Malcolm parade up and down the hallway, chest puffed, voice just loud enough for everyone to hear the cadence of authority, never the substance. He loved these moments, the subtle intimidation, the exaggerated corrections, the showmanship of power. To him, I was already a shadow, a name he could discard like lint on his jacket, but shadows see more than people think, between his theatrics. I opened a private interface on my monitor and pulled up the camera feed for our floor, something only the building's authorized parties could access. I scanned through fast-forwarded footage until something caught my eye. Malcolm stepping into his office earlier that morning, directing 2 maintenance workers to remove a wall panel, installing some sort of storage cabinet, then waving them away before locking the door. Unauthorized modifications. In my building, the irony tasted almost sweet. I leaned closer, the same cold calm settling deeper into my veins. He had no idea the cameras weren't owned by the company. They were mine. Just as I switched to the angle near his office door, my phone buzzed a sharp, insistent vibration that cut through the quiet. I glanced down and felt a slow, dangerous smile tug at the edges of my mouth. Building operations alert. Unregistered electrical load detected on floor 27. Review required by property owner. Property owner Me. I tilted the phone slightly, making sure no one saw the notification glowing on the screen. Malcolm strutted by at that exact moment, throwing me a dismissive look, completely unaware that the entire building had just whispered a secret directly into my hand. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The insult he threw at me earlier had settled, solidified, and turned into something sharper. And as the afternoon light dimmed across the floor, something else rose quietly beneath it, an undercurrent, a shift, the first ripple of a wave Malcolm never saw coming. Night has a way of sharpening questions you tried to ignore during the day. By the time I got home, the humiliation had faded into something colder, tighter and itch beneath the skin that refused to settle. So instead of sleeping, I opened my laptop, pulled up the building's internal blueprints, and began retracing every corner of the 27th floor. It didn't take long for that uneasy feeling to sharpen into certainty. The system flagged a recent structural interaction in Malcolm's office, something I hadn't approved. I zoomed in on the maintenance logs, and there it was, a mysterious request submitted under a generic contractor code. No name, no authorization trail. Just a timestamp and a note that read, "Panel replacement." That alone would have been suspicious, but the infrared scan attached beneath the log told a different story entirely. Someone had added equipment, and not the harmless kind. I isolated the heat signatures, cross-referencing them with the camera footage I'd watched earlier. As the view sharpened frame by frame, the pieces clicked together like a puzzle no one wanted to finish. Hidden behind that wall panel was a mini-server, unregistered, unauthorized, and drawing far more power than anything in a standard office should. Beneath it sat a backup power unit that didn't even match commercial safety codes, and tucked along the back wall, barely visible unless you knew what to look for, was a makeshift fire-resistant cabinet, the kind of DIY contraption you'd see in YouTube videos titled "How to Break Every Building Regulation at Once." A slow exhale left my chest. Then, despite everything, a laugh, low, quiet, and edged with disbelief. Wonderful. I thought, he's not just stupid, he's creative about it. Because this wasn't just a poor decision, it was a legal disaster waiting to happen in a commercial high-rise. These weren't small violations, they were Class A safety risks, the kind that could shut down an entire floor or spark fines large enough to make shareholders cry. If city inspectors ever noticed this setup, Malcolm wouldn't just lose his title, he'd likely lose sleep for the next decade. I leaned back, letting the glow of the blueprint reflect off the ceiling. My pulse had steadied, but the tension in my jaw hadn't faded. Every instinct urged me to report the violation immediately. One phone call, one emailed photo. That was all it would take. But revenge, real revenge, requires patience and timing. So I saved every image, every log, every frame of footage. Then, I closed the blueprint tab and opened the building's administrative panel. A bright orange banner slid across the top of the screen. City Safety Division mandatory inspections scheduled this week. Select your preferred time window. My eyes narrowed, so the city was already coming. And I, the property owner Malcolm didn't know he'd insulted, had the authority to choose the exact hour they showed up. A quiet, dangerous satisfaction settled into me. The truth wasn't just loud. It was about to be scheduled. This is a passage that only good observers can understand. What do you see by the next morning? My anger had cooled into something sharper, something that could be folded neatly and hidden in a suit pocket. I didn't rush. I didn't raise my voice. I simply walked into the building with the quiet intention of a man who already knew the ending to a story everyone else was still misreading. The first thing I did was open the inspection portal and select a time. The city had offered a wide range midday, afternoon, early evening. Reasonable slots meant for convenience, not disruption. I skipped past all of them and scrolled straight to the option labeled Dawn Inspection. It was a miserable hour, unwelcome, inconvenient, perfect. Ridgeway Dynamics' executive team arrived early every day, convinced discipline was measured by how quickly they could caffeinate themselves before sunrise. Malcolm prided himself on being the earliest among them. So that was when the inspectors would arrive, right between his first cup of coffee and the moment he started barking orders at people he thought couldn't bite back. I clicked confirm, letting the system lock the schedule. The pressure inside me didn't explode, it condensed, sharpening until my thoughts felt metallic. Later that afternoon, Malcolm strutted around the office again, gesturing grandly at blueprint drafts pinned across the hallway wall. "We're expanding the west side next quarter," he boomed. We'll knock out this wall, extend my office, maybe add a secondary meeting suite. This floor is going to be the flagship of everything we do. I stood a few feet away, nodding politely as if I were listening. When in reality, my phone screen displayed a message chain with the building's chief engineering officer. We were finalizing the logistics of the inspection entry protocols. Floor access, the subtle shutdown of the power grid that would need to occur 5 minutes beforehand. North Lobby Electronic Control Audit. The form read, it sounded harmless, technical, routine. In truth, that audit required full access to every room on the floor, including Malcolm's office and the equipment he illegally installed. All I had to do was say yes, and the engineering team was ready. I signed off with a small tap of my thumb as I slipped the phone back into my pocket. A soft ping chimed a new email. I glanced down, expecting some automated notification. Instead, the sender's name made my brow lift. From Carter & Wells, Biotech Partners. Subject appreciated your professionalism. Yesterday I opened it. Mr. Price, your composure during yesterday's meeting did not go unnoticed. We respect how calmly you handled an uncomfortable situation. Next time, we'd prefer to speak with you directly. You clearly understand the bigger picture. Warm regards. Elaine Foster. A slow, controlled smile found its way to my face. Not triumphant, just knowing. I looked across the room at Malcolm, who was bragging to 2 junior managers about vision and leadership. His phone, as far as I could see, remained silent. He didn't get that email. Of course he didn't. The pressure before dawn was building, and I was the only one in the room who knew exactly what was coming. There was something in the back that no one expected. Dawn arrived with the kind of silence that feels staged, too still, too careful, like the world was holding its breath for something it didn't want to witness. I stepped onto the 27th floor at 6 o'clock sharp, coffee in hand, acting as if nothing unusual was about to unfold. The quiet itself was a rope pulled tight between 2 towers, humming with strain. At 6:10, the building's automated announcement system chimed. A calm female voice filled every corridor. Attention, floor 27. Mandatory safety inspection. Please exit the office within 10 minutes. Even I felt the tension crackle. Malcolm emerged from his office almost instantly, hair uncombed, tie crooked, annoyance radiating off him like cheap cologne. What is this? He snapped, waving his phone like it personally offended him. Another pointless disturbance. This is ridiculous. Who schedules these things at dawn? The answer, of course, was me. But I simply sipped my coffee. Employees began gathering their bags, confusion spreading across their faces. Some whispered, some scurried. Most just looked exhausted and irritated. Malcolm, however, turned livid. This is a joke, he barked. We have a leadership sync at 7. Tell whoever's in charge we're not participating. Right on cue. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open, and out stepped the building's engineering team and 2 members of security vests, crisp, expressions neutral, clipboards in hand. They walked directly toward me without hesitation, stopping only a foot away. The lead technician gave a respectful nod. Owner Price, shall we begin? The words hit the floor like a dropped wrench. For a split second, no one moved. Then all at once eyes widened, murmurs sparked, and chairs halfway pushed back froze mid-motion. Malcolm's face drained of color so fast it was almost impressive. Owner, what he stammered, turning his head toward me as if I'd just betrayed the laws of physics. His eyes searched my face for an explanation, some logical thread he could pull on to untangle what he'd just heard. I offered none. The whispers behind us grew louder. He owns the building. No wonder he didn't react yesterday. Malcolm messed with the wrong person. Their voices weren't even subtle anymore. Inside, I felt the tension in my chest stretch to its limit, then settle into something smooth, controlled, dangerously calm. The satisfaction wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the kind that slid through your veins like a slow electrical current. I gave Malcolm a small, almost friendly smile and stepped closer, speaking lightly, almost casually. Don't worry, Malcolm. It's just a basic safety requirement. I leaned in just enough for only him to hear. Nothing to be afraid of, unless there's something in your office that shouldn't be there. He blinked rapidly, throat tightening. The technicians waited. Security stood by. Noise rippled like a tide across the floor, and in that perfectly stretched, razor-thin silence, the CEO finally realized the morning he thought he controlled never belonged to him at all. The moment the inspectors stepped toward Malcolm's office, the temperature in the hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. Maybe it was the air conditioning. Maybe it was the fear leaking out of my CEO's pores. Either way. I followed at a measured pace, hands tucked neatly into my pockets, letting the cold settle into my voice and bones. "Please unlock the door, Mr. Ridgway," the lead inspector said. Malcolm hesitated just long enough to confirm every suspicion he didn't realize he was broadcasting. Then he fumbled with his keycard and stepped aside as the inspectors entered. The room was dark at first, blinds still drawn, but the second the overhead lights flickered on, the truth lit up with them. There it was. The unauthorized mini-server humming quietly in the corner, cables snaking across the floor in a tangle of negligence, the non-compliant backup power unit stuffed beneath the desk like a guilty secret. And against the far wall sat the absurd, crooked metal cabinet, unlicensed, uncertified, and looking exactly like the kind of thing someone buys after watching half of a DIY fireproofing video. The lead inspector crouched, scanned the serial numbers, and his brows pulled together in a slow, ominous knot. "These items aren't approved for use in any commercial building," he said, voice flat. "This is a direct violation of safety code." Malcolm swallowed hard, already paling. I didn't install those," he muttered, even though the footage I'd saved at home showed the opposite. But the worst was still waiting to be uncovered. One inspector tugged open the metal cabinet and stopped. His expression changed, tightening into something colder than mine. Inside were stacks of documents stamped with red confidential markings, the kind of files our company was legally required to store in a certified vault, not a crooked metal box Malcolm hid inside a building he didn't own. "That," the inspector said slowly, "is a Class A compliance breach. These materials must be secured in approved containment units. Housing them here is grounds for floor shutdown and federal audit." Silence crashed over the room. Malcolm stammered. "It's not what it looks like. This was temporary. I was going to." I finally stepped forward, voice level, controlled, almost bored. "Malcolm, I told you," I said, letting each word drop like a small, polished blade. "Don't install cheap junk in my building." No one laughed, not even close. The situation had drifted far past humor. The inspectors photographed everything. Security listed each violation. Malcolm stood trembling beside the desk, looking smaller than I had ever seen him, and as I watched him unravel, I felt nothing but a cold, steady certainty. The truth hadn't just been revealed, it had been waiting for this moment. The hallway felt too small once the city inspectors arrived, 4 of them in dark jackets marked with the municipal seal, clipboards tucked under their arms, expressions carved from granite. They weren't here for a friendly checkup. They were here because the violations in Malcolm's office weren't minor oversights. They were alarms loud enough to reach the city's regulatory division in under an hour. Their presence tightened the atmosphere like a wire pulled to the point of snapping. "Mr. Ridgway," the lead inspector said, "you'll need to step out of your office immediately. We're initiating an emergency safety quarantine for a heartbeat." Malcolm didn't move. He just blinked, as if his brain couldn't compute that someone, anyone, was telling him to leave a room he believed he ruled. Then the words landed, and anger flashed across his face. "This is absurd. You can't order me out of my own workspace. Do you know who I am?" "Yes," the inspector replied calmly. "And that's why we're insisting you comply." That line alone silenced the entire floor. Employees poked their heads out from cubicles, confusion spreading like a cold draft. Conversations died mid-sentence. A few customers from Carter and Wells still touring the office came to a stop by the glass wall, watching the scene unfold with uneasy fascination. Malcolm finally stepped back, but only because 2 security officers moved in beside him. He looked less like a CEO and more like a man slipping on a floor he once thought was solid. But the real moment, the one that shifted the ground entirely, came when the inspectors turned toward me. "We need authorization to shut down the entire floor," the lead inspector said. "Only the property owner can approve that order." Malcolm froze again. The employees froze with him. Even the air froze. I reached out my hand. "Show me where to sign." The inspector flipped the clipboard around, and I wrote my signature, Rogan Price. Owner of the building Malcolm believed he commanded. The room exhaled all at once, a ripple of shock sweeping through the crowd. Whispers rose instantly. "He owns the building, Wait Rogan." No wonder he stayed calm yesterday. Malcolm's face went sheet white. He stared at me as if I'd just peeled back a mask he never realized I was wearing. "Tang nay," he whispered, voice cracking. "Is yours?" I turned to him with a quiet, almost gentle expression, the kind that's worse than anger, because it leaves no room to argue. "Malcolm," I said, "you really should read the name of the building owner before you publicly insult them." Silence detonated across the floor, silent, heavy, devastating. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't violent. It was worse, because it was final. The inspectors moved past us to begin sealing the area. Security escorted Malcolm toward the elevator. Employees stepped aside, creating a narrow path he was forced to walk. No one spoke. No one defended him. The tension that had been building all week finally ruptured, but not with shouts or chaos. Just with the quiet fall of a man who never thought gravity applied to him. By the time the inspectors finished sealing Malcolm's office, the entire 27th floor felt like a crime scene wrapped in corporate silence. Yellow safety tape crossed the hallway, every door requiring authorization, every workstation locked out, with one signature. The company had lost its ability to function for the day. Computers were dead, power rerouted, systems frozen. Cold victory doesn't feel warm or satisfying. It settles in your chest like ice, steady and heavy. I felt every inch of it. Employees gathered in small clusters, whispering in shaken voices. The leadership team tried to regain control. But it was hard to look authoritative when half the building had just watched inspectors escort your CEO out like a man who forgot the rules he wrote. What made it worse for them was the timing. Carter and Wells. The clients from yesterday's disastrous meeting had arrived for a scheduled follow-up tour. With the floor shut down, the executives scrambled like fish spilled out of a net. "Mr. Price," one of the directors whispered urgently, "could you speak with them until we reach Malcolm?" I almost laughed. Almost. Instead. I waved a calm hand and stepped toward the visitors. Elaine Foster, the lead representative, greeted me with the same measured confidence she'd shown yesterday, though now her eyes flicked to the sealed office behind me. "Is everything all right?" she asked. "Oh, perfectly," I said with a light, ironic ease. "Just a minor safety inconvenience. Happens more often when leadership installs creative electrical equipment." Her brow lifted. She understood the implication immediately. "I see." Across the room, two executives hovered by the conference entrance, silently begging her to come speak with them. She didn't move. "Would you like me to explain what's going on?" I asked. "Please," she replied. So I did simply. Calmly. Politely. No embellishment, no dramatics, just facts wrapped in the thin layer of sarcasm I didn't bother to hide anymore. The city's shutting down the floor for a full safety inspection. I told her it seems someone in management made unauthorized modifications to the building's structure and electrical grid. Since I'm the property owner, I'm required to oversee the shutdown. "You're the owner," she echoed softly. "Yes, and unfortunately, the company won't be able to continue operations here today." Behind her, the executives were practically deflating. Elaine exchanged a meaningful look with her team, then turned back to me. Her words were calm, but decisive enough to crack the air open. "Rogan, if you ever open a separate office in this building, we would be very interested in moving our contract to work directly with you." The sentence landed like a silent explosion. Executives behind her went stone still. Someone dropped a folder. The room inhaled sharply and forgot how to exhale. I didn't smile. Cold victory rarely smiles. "I appreciate that," I said quietly, "and I'll keep it in mind." But inside, beneath the calm surface, something shifted, something final, something irreversible. Because it was at that exact moment the company realized the fall of Malcolm Ridgway wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of theirs. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the building was already awake in a way I'd never seen before. The lobby, usually a quiet place of soft footsteps and muted conversations, had transformed into a makeshift war room. Members of the board stood in a tight semicircle beneath the chandelier, their expressions grim, clipped, and carved from stone. Their suit jackets weren't even fully buttoned. Some looked like they had been called out of bed. A mandatory emergency meeting. They'd called it Translation Malcolm Ridgway was out of time. I stayed near the far end of the lobby, leaning against a column where no one would mistake my presence as participation. It wasn't my meeting. I didn't speak. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. The evening before had already spoken for me. Malcolm stood at the center of the group, shoulders hunched, jaw tight, eyes darting between the board members like a man scanning for exits in a building with none. His usual swagger had evaporated, replaced by the hollow posture of someone who knew the walls were closing in. "Mr. Ridgway," the chairwoman said, her voice sharp enough to slice the air. We reviewed the city inspector's preliminary findings: unauthorized electrical installation, violation of structural codes, breach of document security protocols. These are not small matters. Malcolm's mouth opened, but the words tangled before they formed. The equipment was temporary. It wasn't meant to what another board member cut in. Burn down a floor, trigger a full city audit, jeopardize millions in contracts. The questions fell, one after another. Relentless as rain on concrete, Malcolm's face went paler with every accusation until the real blow landed. A tall board member in a gray suit stepped forward, adjusting his glasses as he asked, loud enough for the entire lobby to hear, "Is it true you publicly insulted Mr. Price yesterday in the building he owns?" The silence that followed was a vacuum cold, consuming, undeniable. Malcolm's skin turned the color of paper left in a drawer too long. His eyes shot toward me, and for the first time, I saw fear, not anger, not ego, not indignation, genuine fear, the kind a man feels when he realizes he's been swinging a sword inside a room full of mirrors. I remained still, hands folded calmly in front of me. I didn't nod. I didn't smirk. I didn't offer him the dignity of eye contact. The board didn't need my confirmation anyway. "Effective immediately," the chairwoman announced, her voice steady. "You are suspended from all duties pending full investigation." No one applauded. No one gasped. The decision simply landed heavy, final, inescapable. They escorted Malcolm toward the side doors. His footsteps echoed through the marble foyer, sharp, uneven, fading fast. And with each step, the last strands of his authority unraveled behind him. The next morning felt strangely quiet, almost ceremonial. As I stepped off the elevator onto the 27th floor, dawn light spilled through the hallway windows in long, pale streaks, washing over the caution signs and sealed doorways that still marked the aftermath of yesterday's chaos. The building smelled faintly of new wiring and disinfectant, an oddly fitting scent for a place about to be scrubbed clean of old power. The engineering team was already there, resetting circuits and verifying structural stability. One of them nodded respectfully when he saw me. "Final sweep won't take long. Mr. Price." I returned the nod, calm settling into my chest like a warm stone. "Take your time." A few minutes later, security escorted Malcolm out of the stairwell. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair uneven, and the exhaustion on his face looked deeper than sleep deprivation. He carried a cardboard box, his cardboard box filled with whatever fragments of authority he still clung to. "Mr. Ridgway," the guard said quietly, "you have 15 minutes to collect the rest of your personal items." Malcolm looked at me, then really looked. There was no anger left, no arrogance, not even denial. Just a hollow understanding that the building he'd strutted through for years no longer recognized him. I walked with him to the doorway of his former office. He stopped just shy of the threshold, perhaps hoping I'd say nothing. But silence, I'd learned, is the sharpest instrument when used correctly. I rested a hand lightly on the doorframe. "I'll be needing this office," I said, voice smooth, steady. For someone with actual competence, the words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. Their weight did the work. Malcolm's throat bobbed once as he nodded a small, broken motion. Then he lifted his box and walked past me, each step illuminated by the growing gold of the sunrise. The early light caught the fatigue on his face, carving deeper lines, dulling the last flicker of resistance in his eyes. When the elevator doors closed, there was no echo of his presence left. I turned back toward my office, and stepped inside. The space looked different now, stripped of unauthorized equipment and bruised ego. Clean, bright, mine. I closed the door gently behind me, letting the sound settle in the room like the final punctuation mark on a long, turbulent chapter. Only when the building was quiet, the sun fully risen, and the weight of the night behind me, did I allow myself to exhale. Not in relief, not in revenge, but in recognition. Victory hadn't come from retaliation. It had come from order, truth, and the law finally aligning with the path I'd walked in silence for years, in the quiet after everything ended. I realized something simple. You don't have to raise your voice to reclaim your power, you just have to know when to stand your ground. If you've ever fought a silent battle of your own, tell me, where are you listening from right now? Drop a comment, share this story with someone who needs it, and subscribe if you want more moments where justice speaks softly and still wins.